answering your best Lorcana questions. Let's get into it. Alright, I'm super excited to get into this video, but before we do, we will be doing a giveaway. I will be giving away one of these two playmats. You get to choose to one of you. All you have to do is, of course, number one, like this video. Number two, be subscribed to the channel. And number three, down below in the comment section, ask me any question you want to on Lorcana, anything that might be on your mind, whether it's a collection question, a hobbyist question, anything you might want to. It's one of my favorite things to get to do, to get to interact with you in the comment section and then even get to bring these questions to future Q&A videos. I'm sure we'll do more of these in the future. Thank you all for your support. And now, let's get into the video. All right, so the theme for today's episode is all gonna be around graded cards. Anything that has to do with grading cards, grading card companies, mixing that in with Lorcana, everything in between. I have the questions here in my phone. As usual, they're all random, so I can give you like an actual, like real reaction to it. And so let's go through them one by one. So the first question, with the current pop report of Elsa PSA 10s being so high, do you think it's still a good investment right now? And then it says see data below. So before we look at the data, I will say this is something that I've spoken with a lot of different hobby enthusiasts about, a lot of friends of mine that are noticing this trend, and I have been asked this question by a few, I believe, subscribers in the channel. So thank you so much for asking this question. And with that, we'll look at the data here before I kind of give my thoughts, because I'm seeing basically all of the different chase cards from Shimmering Skies all the way back to the first chapter. So Mufasa PSA 9 versus PSA 10, it just says NA, just because more than likely my guess would be right now there's not enough data flowing in from Shimmering Skies because it's just such a new set. It's very probable that you can see the actual pop report of Mufasa's if there are, depending how many there even are of PSA 10s versus 9s, but there's probably not enough to give like an accurate comparison. So that says NA. But here we go. Ursula's Return. Ariel Sonic Warrior PSA 9, there are 93 for the pop report. Ariel Sonic Warrior PSA 10, there are 128. Ursula Deceiver Evolve for Into the Inklands. PSA 9, there are 277. PSA 10, there are 310. Cinderella Ballroom Sensation. PSA 9, there are 654. PSA 10, there are 626. And Elsa Spirit of Winter from first chapter. PSA 9, there are 692. And PSA 10, there are 1,885. Now, I'm sure that we have these stats like popped up somewhere on the screen. If you look at the deltas of the other ones compared to the first chapter, obviously you can see that there's a much wider gap with Elsa PSA 9, PSA 10 versus the others. The first thing I'll say is I've been getting so many great comments from y'all in the comments section saying that, whether you're someone who might be like my age, older than me, and even some of you who also are like father and daughters watching together, or your parents watching with your kids. I mean, that truly is like one of the coolest things that I can hear, just hearing that you have the current generation of hobby enthusiasts and the future generation watching this channel together. It probably it's like probably putting a smile on my face like every single time I see it, and it's just one of the best parts of my day. So I'll start off with an analogy that all of you can kind of appreciate, and that would be that if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's probably not a goat, right? I mean, like realistically, there are probably some things happening over on the PSA side, understanding that PSA is an entity that they are able to make markets and be able to make prices based off of true opinion, right? You are able to say, okay, I'm gonna look at an Elsa at a PSA, at a PSA graded version of an Elsa and say to myself as a grader, like, maybe today, even though there's a little bit of whitening on this card, a little bit of chipping, just a couple of imperfections that I can visibly see, it's still a very clean card. We're gonna make it a PSA 10, we're gonna have that go through. And then there also could be certain days, certain situations where you say, you know what, we need to crack down a little bit more. And if I see an imperfection, it is immediately going to be disqualified from being a PSA 10. Again, because we're all human, we're not robots. Like we are doing this based off of specific judgment and opinion. Those things are always going to happen. This seems like a pretty big delta and a pretty big discrepancy, and realistically there are probably reasons behind that, and it's also why a lot of individuals in different hobbies, whether it be TCGs or sports hobbies, have said to themselves like, I might go away from grading cards because it just kind of seems like there might be some other motives, ulterior motives at play that I don't know if they benefit me or not. All of those things are very fair. What I would ask you to do, just looking forward with this specific card, in this case being Elsa, going forward, try to see Elsa and try to see this ultimate chase card from the first chapter, not in a vacuum, but long term. We're 5 sets into Lorcana, right? And with a 6th set Azure at Sea being announced. You look at Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon, there are quite literally hundreds of sets with decades long of tenureship, going on with those specific hobbies. As time passes, there will be critical events that will happen in the market for Lorcana that will only serve to benefit Elsa. Things like the first chapter eventually going out of print, all of the specific boxes or specific packs with Elsa in them that could maybe warrant or garner a PSA 10, getting to a very small amount or really almost going totally extinct. So this 1,885 number that you see right now, yes, it's a very big number, no question about it. But long term, it will still more than likely not lose the allure of being that ultimate chase card, right? A lot of times, you're a Pokemon enthusiast and someone will say to you, oh, you collect Pokemon. Do you have a base set Charizard? You're a Yu-Gi-Oh! Enthusiast. Oh, you collect Yu-Gi-Oh! Do you have an LOB Blue Eyes White Dragon? More than likely, that is going to be how this card is spoken of long term, where someone will say, oh, you collect Lorcana. Do you have a first chapter Elsa Spirit of Winter? Very doubtful that ever changes. And so most likely as time passes and the market is allowed to price in all of these PSA 10s, it will only serve to benefit the hobby long term. But yes, short term, it is definitely a little bit wonky. I can certainly appreciate that. But certainly if you're going to be a collector for the long-term future and it's something that you want to have as part of your collection, I would just say, at least in my personal opinion, don't let that large delta pull you away or deter you from getting something that will most likely be one of the most important pieces in Lorcana history for a very long time. All right, second question, here we go. Should I be collecting PSA 9s or PSA 10s? I want to say I've answered this question before, but if I haven't, that's not surprising, because I do feel like this is something that I talk about quite a bit with anybody who collects or just anybody who's interested in grading cards in general, because I do have a lot of cross-pollination with friends of mine who do like to collect TCGs, but at the same time, like, for instance, I'm a sports enthusiast and a lot of my friends are sports enthusiasts as well. And so basketball cards and football cards and things like that, this is an area of focus where, like, my world of TCGs and their world of sports cards can kind of come together, and we can actually have something that we can talk about and kind of share common ground in. And when I get asked this question from those individuals, and I understand you want me to talk about a little bit more on the statistical side or strategy side of things, and certainly I will. But before I do that, I always give the same answer, at least to start, and I'm not going to change here, and I probably never will change. I would just say that no matter what you decide to do, whatever your journey is, like if you want to, collect all PSA 10s, let's just put it in a vacuum. Let's just do two sides. On one hand, you have, I am only going to collect PSA 10s. And on the other hand, you have, well, I just want to have graded cards. I just want to be able to finish the collection, and maybe they're 9s and 10s, maybe they're 8s, 9s, and 10s, or maybe they're just in slabs. Like, that's okay. No matter who you are, what your journey is, once you pick that journey, once you say, this is truly what I want to do, this is what I love, this is the path I want to go on, just go ahead, go at it full steam ahead, and don't have any regrets, and just love what you're doing. Because the best piece of advice I ever got with collecting, or really, honestly, it probably pertains to anything in general. The second that you stop loving something, no one else around you is going to love it either, right? So like if you're speaking with your friends about the hobby that you're interested in and the things that you're doing, the second that you fall out of love with it, right? I mean, everyone in your orbit is going to fall out of love with it as well. And on some points, that's okay. But also you want to make sure that, if you're going to invest in something that you see it through, right? Because that's what we all want to do at the end of the day is pick something that we love and go for it. That being said, from a statistical side of things, I will tell you that I am personally someone who's in the camp that I only collect PSA 10s. This is not a superficial thing. It is not a matter of like, oh, I'm so good, I have to collect PSA 10s. Really, for me, it's looking within myself and saying to myself that I am someone where, let's take the first chapter, for example. If I had every card of first chapter, like if I had all of them and they were all PSA 10s besides 2 of them being PSA 9, I know myself and I know that I'm going to look at those 2 cards and say, oh, I need to switch those from 9s to 10s at some point. And that's just who I am, right? And so if that's the case, then it's kind of like, okay, well then maybe instead of spending money to make them 9s and then trading them into making them 10s, just be patient. And that's what I've done, right? And so with that, I have seen the repercussions of it where I don't have as many graded cards as other people because I just know that I want to be able to wait and save up my money until a point where I say like, you know what, I'm ready to go get the Cinderella that you saw in the one episode that we did a few episodes back, right? Like sometimes it takes a longer period of time for me to acquire a graded card, but that's okay because I love going about the process that way, and that's what I've decided is best for me. What I will tell you, if you do decide, you know, to go a path of, say, you know, anything, like not just 10s, but 9s, 8s, you know, everything in between. The one thing I would say as you're going and filling out this collection journey, you're going on this collection journey of getting these different graded cards. A lot of times people ask me like, when is it a good time to get certain numbers, right? Like, should I be buying PSA 10s right now? Should I be buying PSA 9s, PSA 8s, things like that? Really, for the most part, at least in my experience, what I found, PSA 10s, it kind of is what it is. You're going to pay a 2 to 4x premium based on the hobby, based at the time in the market, just because you have something that a very reputable company has said, we are deeming this as perfection. It is a perfect card. There is nothing wrong with it, and the hobby is always going to pay a premium for perfection. You look on the other side, PSA 8s, the near mint 8s, that is always going to basically, I shouldn't say always, but most of the time, going to be just a raw version of the card. If you have, you know, for instance, say like a Cinderella, that, you know, Ballroom Sensation, that's $300, $250, $300, something like that. Usually you're going to find that PSA 8s are going to be around the same area. PSA 10s are going to be that 2.5, 3.5x premium. It's really the PSA 9s that you want to be able to watch out for. That's where you're going to see the market kind of have some variance, and it really just depends on macroeconomic trends. So if you think back to like COVID 4 years ago, you have a hobby that everyone is flooding into with a lot of, you know, people with money to spend. Everybody's indoors. They're getting back in touch with those hobbies, their nostalgic roots, and they say, I want to pick up this hobby. I need a hobby. I'm in, you know, right? It was such a hot time for TCGs and collecting in general. PSA 9s were going for a lot more back then, at least in the hobbies that I was a part of. If there were others that maybe there weren't, don't hold me, you know, don't hold me accountable for those. But that's when you would find that the PSA 9s would be a little bit more expensive. Nowadays, you kind of are seeing an opposite effect where, quite honestly, people have fled from the hobby a little bit, right? Doesn't mean that they still don't have the love for it from a nostalgia perspective, but they have fled away from it, so the money floods away from it. So PSA 9s might be a little bit closer to PSA 8s than they were to, you know, as opposed to 2020 where they were kind of in the PSA 10 range. Really, I would tell you, if you're a buyer right now, be a great time to go for PSA 9s. I've called it out in the Market Watch video before. It's a fantastic time to be collecting enchanted rares that aren't sort of those like top 3 enchanteds or those really big chase card enchanteds, because the market is so, I don't want to say down right now, but it's just, there's a lot of, the market's very wide right now in Lorcana. There's 18 new chase card enchanted cards that are one in, you know, dozens and dozens of packs that are, you know, in these booster boxes. It's very hard to grab them all, so like you have to kind of have, you know, be able to you know, lower that price a little bit from a seller's perspective. So if you are a buyer right now, great time to be going for 9s, but I would just kind of keep those things in mind. But always, most importantly, just make sure that no matter what you're doing and no matter what you're collecting, that you love it. That is the most important thing. All right, last question, let's do it. All right, you've said in the past that PSA is the best grading company to use. I have said that. Which company would be the next best? So after PSA, which I do agree, it is the best one. It has the longest track record, it has the most dependency, and then also, in my opinion, it has the absolute best process of getting your cards in circulation and getting back to you. So I do agree, it's the best process. After that, I would say really you only have 2 other contenders. After that, you have a bunch that I just think don't have enough credibility. And quite frankly, I think you really would have to have a very specific, very niche example of wanting to grade with a company that isn't these other 2 companies, because I do think that these 2 other companies are pretty competitive when it comes to price, as well as PSA. So if you have a reason to go to a different grading company, I'm not saying that like you shouldn't, but I'm just saying you probably should be able to universally find a home with one of these 3 companies depending on what you're doing. So we'll put PSA out there number 1. The other 2 come down to CGC and Beckett. Really, your pros and cons with CGC and Beckett, the first really nice thing about both of these companies is you should be able to figure out what's best for you simply because they're very different from each other. They both have pros and cons. I would say The pros for Beckett is that first and foremost, it has a longer track record than CGC. It's been around for a very long time, and when you do get those top end pristine grades, obviously, you know, because they actually have pristine grades, even black label grades, things like that. Like when you do get those 9.5s, 10s, and if you're lucky enough, black label 10s, that carries with it a similar type of premium as PSA, and even in some cases, like with the black label, can carry an even higher premium. The absolute massive downside with Beckett is that it is just a brutal process. It really is. And look, this is a tremendous company with a tremendous track record of, like, again, of being able to have an asset that if you have an asset that is a very high grade graded by this company, that means something in the market, and that is no easy feat. So they've earned a track record of success on that side of things, but their process is very difficult. Like I said, it's very analog. Like I haven't used them in a while because this is actually what deterred me from using them anymore, but it's very analog. Like you have to go away from like doing things online. You have to print out sheets and mail sheets in with cards and things like you have to write down what you're looking to do, as opposed to, like, you know, of course, PSA, where you have a very specific process on their website that you can use. That's a huge downside right there for me. Also, like, and this does matter, and this kind of transitions into where I'll say CGC is a massive pro. The Beckett slabs aren't like my cup of tea. Some people love them, some people don't. That's obviously to each their own. The one thing I would say that is like universally agreed upon and going into CGC is that their slabs are beautiful. I mean, they really are. Like the crystal clear acrylic, like it really looks like the card is floating. It is an amazing look to the actual card. Not a huge fan that they changed their label recently from like that blue label to the, you know, to like the black label. I'm not saying I like one more than the other. I just think that when you change things like that, you're sort of confusing your market, you're confusing your buyer a little bit. So I'm not like a big fan of that. I think long term that really won't matter because long term nobody will remember. But just in the near term, that is something that I wouldn't say I'm super high on. At the same time, where it is similar with Beckett is you have the specific grading labels. Like if you have two specific labels, they both have, unlike PSA, they have the 9, 9.5, 10, and then they have that like upper echelon, like pristine 10, or, you know, in Beckett's case, black label, and yeah, in CGC's case, pristine. And even I do think Beckett says pristine for their like gold 10, but it kind of just, you know, they have their 10s and then they have their elevated. It's a very similar grading scale. It really just comes down to what are you looking for? Are you looking for the track record, which Beckett will probably give you, and that would help with resale and things like that? Or are you looking for the look? Like, I mean, are you looking to have something that you're looking at and saying like, this just looks so beautiful? And again, this is all my personal opinion. I'm sure I'll get comments out there that will say like, well, I think Beckett slabs look great. I don't disagree with you. They look great. Well, CGC, you can resell those slabs and they do great on the secondary market. You are correct. You are both correct. It is just splitting hairs between like, if I had to pick one or the other. The point I'm getting at is it's actually very difficult. You know, I do not like being on the fence with these kind of things, but it is really difficult. It really does come down to what type of collector you are. And where I would really draw a line in the sand is if you are somebody who is looking to resell the card, if you are looking to invest and grade a card to make a market for that card, Beckett really is probably your go-to, especially if you think that that card has a chance of getting a gold label or better. For CGC, it really does come down to like, if you like the look of it, if it's going to be in your collection long term, go for it, because who cares? Because you probably won't resell it anyway, right? And then no regrets on that side of things. So it really depends. But overall, the reason I do say PSA is number one over both of those is because PSA sort of has both. It's a timeless looking slab, timeless look with an unbelievable track record, and their process of grading the card is really, really well done and well thought out, and they've made updates and iterations to it. So that's kind of my thoughts in terms of like stack ranking them. I'd basically go 1 and then like 2A, 2B, depending on what matters to you as a collector, I guess I'd say. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you all so much for the great questions. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so you have a chance to get into the giveaway for one of those 2 playmats. Can't wait to interact with you in the comment section. Can't wait to hear those great questions. And until that time, we are eternally grateful for you all, and we will see you all on the other side. Peace out.